The great archive of Prime stretched across 7 mountain ranges. Its halls were carved from living crystal, and its walls held more knowledge than most species could gather in 10,000 lifetimes. Scholars from across the known galaxy came here to study, to learn, and to solve the mysteries that had puzzled their ancestors for generations. But there was one mystery that had defeated them all. In the deepest chamber of the archive, behind doors that required the genetic signatures of 12 different species to open, there sat a single artifact. It was small, barely larger than a child's hand. The object was made of a strange material that the galaxy's finest scientists could not fully understand. They called it paper after translating some of the surrounding texts. It was fragile, yellowed with age, and covered in marks that had consumed the lives of countless researchers. Director stood before this artifact now, her 4 eyes blinking slowly as she studied the marks for the millionth time. She was tall and slender, with skin that shifted between purple and blue depending on her mood. Right now, she was a deep shade of frustrated violet. 327 years, she said to herself. 327 years since my grandmother's grandmother first looked upon these symbols, and still, we cannot read them. The language on the paper belonged to a species that the galaxy had nearly forgotten. The humans. They had been a minor presence in galactic history, appearing briefly in the records of the first expansion era before vanishing completely. Some said they had destroyed themselves in war. Others claimed they had simply faded away, unable to compete with the stronger, faster, smarter species that dominated the stars. All that remained of them were scattered artifacts, a few ruined settlements on distant moons, some primitive tools, and this paper, along with dozens of others like it, covered in a written language that no one could decipher. Had devoted her entire career to solving this puzzle. She had studied the human artifacts obsessively. She had learned everything the galaxy knew about human biology, their brief history, their primitive culture. But the language remained locked away from her understanding. The symbols on the paper were unlike anything else in galactic linguistics. They curved and flowed in ways that seemed almost artistic. Some were simple, just a few strokes. Others were incredibly complex, with dozens of marks combined into single characters. The scholars had identified over 5,000 unique symbols, but they could not determine how they worked together. "Director," a voice called from the doorway. It belonged to Ta, her senior research assistant. He was short and round, with dozens of small tentacles that constantly moved and twitched. "The Council has sent another message. They are asking about our progress." Did not turn around. "Tell them what we told them last cycle and the cycle before that. We are working. We have theories, but we have no breakthrough." Ta shuffled closer, his tentacles wrapping around a data tablet. "They are becoming impatient, Director. The funding committee meets in 30 days. If we cannot show progress, they may redirect our resources to other projects." "Other projects," repeated bitterly. What other project in this archive matters more than understanding a lost species? What other mystery has consumed more brilliant minds than this one? "I do not disagree with you," Ta said carefully, "but the Council sees things differently. They believe that the humans were too primitive to have left anything worth studying. They say we are chasing shadows." Finally turned to face her assistant. Her skin had shifted to an angry shade of red. "Primitive. The species that created this language was not primitive. Look at these symbols, Ta. Really look at them. Do you see what I see?" Ta moved closer to the display case that held the ancient paper, his many eyes focused on the strange marks. "I see complexity, Director, but complexity does not equal importance." "You are wrong," said firmly. "This language is not just complex, it is beautiful. There is art in these symbols. There is thought and care in how they are formed. A primitive species does not create something like this. Only a people with deep culture, deep history, deep wisdom could produce such writing." She gestured at the paper with one of her 4 arms. We have found over 200 of these documents across the galaxy. Some contain the same symbols repeated in different arrangements. Others have completely unique combinations. This was not a simple language for basic communication. This was something more, something special. Ta's tentacles tightened around his tablet. He had heard this speech many times before. Director's passion for the human mystery was well known throughout the archive. Some admired her dedication. Others thought she had lost perspective. "What do you want me to tell the council?" he asked. Was silent for a long moment. Then she sighed, her skin fatting back to a calmer blue. "Tell them we are close. Tell them we have developed new analytical methods. Tell them whatever they need to hear to give us more time." "Is any of that true?" "The new methods are true. Their effectiveness remains to be seen." Ta nodded and turned to leave, but he stopped at the doorway and looked back. "Director, may I ask you something personal?" "You may ask, I may not answer." "Why does this matter so much to you? The humans are gone. Even if we decode their language, what will we learn? What will we gain?" Considered the question carefully. It was one she had asked herself many times over the years. The answer had never been simple. "Because they were here," she finally said. "The humans walked among the stars just like us. They looked up at the same suns. They wondered about the same moons. They asked the same questions that we ask. And then they disappeared, completely and totally disappeared. If we cannot understand them, if we cannot learn their language, then they truly are gone forever. And I do not think any species deserves to be forgotten, not even a primitive one." Ta had no response to that. He simply bowed his round body slightly and left the chamber. Turned back to the artifact. She activated the magnification field around the display case, enlarging the symbols until they filled her vision. Each mark was precise despite the apparent age of the document. Whoever had created these had taken great care in their work. For the next several hours, she worked alone in the chamber. She ran the symbols through translation algorithms, compared them to every known language in the galactic database, searched for patterns that might reveal the underlying structure. The same work that had been done thousands of times before. The same work that had always led to failure. As the artificial sun of the archive dimmed to signal the end of the work cycle finally stopped, her eyes were tired, her mind was foggy. Another day had passed with no progress. She was about to leave the chamber when her communication device buzzed. It was a message from the archive's main entrance. "Director, we have a visitor. They are asking for you specifically." Frowned. Visitors to the restricted sections of the archive were rare. Visitors asking for her by name were even rarer. "Who is it?" "We are not certain. The identification scanner cannot determine their species. They say they have information about the human artifacts." Skin flashed through several colors rapidly. Excitement, suspicion, hope, fear. She had received such claims before. Charlatans and frauds who claimed to have solved the human mystery, usually seeking money or fame. None of them had ever provided anything useful. But something about this felt different. She could not explain why. "Bring them to my office," she ordered. "I will meet them there." The walk from the deep chamber to her office took nearly half an hour. The archive was vast, and chose to walk rather than use the transport tubes. She needed time to think, to prepare herself for what was probably another disappointment. When she finally reached her office, Ta was waiting outside the door. His tentacles were moving faster than usual, a sign of nervousness. "Director, I think you should prepare yourself." "For what?" "For the visitor. They are unusual." Did not understand what that meant until she opened the door and stepped inside. The figure standing in the middle of her office was tall, taller than any species she knew. They wore a simple gray garment that covered most of their body. Their face was smooth and pale, with only 2 eyes set forward in their skull. Their build was straight and vertical, standing on 2 legs with 2 arms hanging at their sides. His heart stopped. She had spent her entire career studying images of this body type. She had memorized every detail from the ancient records. She knew this form better than she knew the forms of many living species. But it was impossible. It had to be impossible. "You are," she began, but the words would not come. The stranger smiled. It was a gentle expression, warm and patient. When they spoke, their voice was clear and strong. "Hello, Director. My name is. I believe you have been trying to read something that belongs to my people." Legs gave out beneath her. Ta rushed in to catch her, his tentacles wrapping around her arms to keep her from falling. A living human was standing in her office. "How?" she whispered. "Your species. The records say you died out thousands of years ago." Smile grew slightly wider. "The records are wrong about many things, including how to read our language." He gestured toward the door. "I understand you have some documents you would like translated. May I see them?" Could only stare. 327 years of research, countless scholars, endless resources, and the answer had just walked through her door. Her skin shifted to a color she had never shown before. A color that meant her entire understanding of the galaxy had just changed forever. In the restricted sections of the archive, word spread quickly. A human had arrived, a living member of a species that everyone believed to be extinct. Researchers abandoned their work to catch a glimpse of the stranger as led him through the crystal halls. Walked calmly, his eyes taking in the magnificent architecture around him. He did not seem impressed or overwhelmed. Instead, he looked almost nostalgic, as if he was seeing something familiar after a long absence. "Your archive is beautiful," he said too. "My people built something similar once, on a world called Alexandria, in a system you probably call Sector 7 Delta." His mind raced. Sector 7 Delta was a restricted zone. The ancient records said that something terrible had happened there during the first expansion era. No one was allowed to visit. No one knew what remained. "You built an archive there?" she asked. "We built many things," replied. "But that was a long time ago. Right now I am more interested in what you have found." They reached the deepest chamber. The doors opened to his genetic signature, and she led the human inside. The display case containing the ancient paper glowed softly in the center of the room. Stopped when he saw it. For the first time since his arrival, his calm expression changed. Something shifted in his eyes, something deep and old and impossibly sad. "I know this document," he said quietly. "I know who wrote it." Activated the magnification field. The symbols expanded until they filled the air around them. "Can you read it?" Was silent for a long moment. His eyes moved across the symbols, left to right, top to bottom. His lips moved slightly as if he was speaking to himself. "Yes," he finally said, "I can read it." Felt her heart's racing. 327 years, generations of scholars, and now, finally, the mystery was about to be solved. "What does it say?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Turned to face her. His expression was strange now. Not sad exactly, but something close to it, something deeper. "Before I tell you, I need you to understand something. The language you have been studying is not just a language. It is not simply a method of communication. It is something much more important, something that your galaxy has never encountered before." "What do you mean?" Gestured at the symbols floating around them. "These marks that you see, these complex characters that have puzzled your researchers for centuries, they are not words in the way you understand words. They are ideas. Each symbol contains not just meaning, but history, emotion, philosophy. Each one is a piece of my people's soul." Did not understand. All languages contain meaning. All writing systems convey ideas. What makes this different? Smiled again, but this time there was no warmth in it. Only an ancient, weary patience. "Show me your writing," he said. "Show me how your people record their thoughts." Hesitated, then activated a secondary display. Text appeared in the air, neat rows of geometric symbols that represented sounds and concepts. "This is our standard academic script," she explained. "Each symbol represents either a phoneme or a base concept. We combine them to create meaning." Nodded, efficient, practical. Your system is designed for clarity and speed. Like most galactic languages, it values function over form. He turned back to the human symbols. "Our language works differently. We call it, though there are other names for it in other human cultures. Each character is a complete thought. Each stroke within the character adds layers of meaning. Learning to read our language does not just teach you vocabulary. It teaches you how to think, how to see connections, how to understand the universe." He pointed to one of the symbols. It was a complex character with many strokes. "This one, for example. Your researchers probably identified it as a recurring symbol. They likely tried to assign it a simple meaning, like a word for good or big or leader." "We thought it might mean sky or heaven," admitted. "You were close," said, "but only close. This character it can mean sky, it can mean heaven, it can mean the natural order of things, it can mean fate or destiny. It can mean the highest principle that governs all existence. What it means in any given sentence depends on the characters around it, the context of the writing, the intention of the author, and the understanding of the reader. It is not one word, it is 1,000 words." Stared at the symbol with new eyes. She had looked at it countless times before, but she had never understood what she was looking at. "This is why we could not decode it," she said slowly. "We were looking for a simple translation, a one-to-one relationship between symbols and meanings." "Yes, and that relationship does not exist in our language. To read, you must not just learn symbols. You must learn an entire way of thinking. You must change how your mind processes information. It takes our children many years to master even basic reading and writing. True fluency requires a lifetime of study." "But you said you could read the document. You said you knew what it meant." "I can, and I do," turned back to the ancient paper in the display case. His eyes grew distant, lost in memory. "This document was written by a woman named, she was a poet, a philosopher, one of the last great writers of her generation." "What does it say?" Took a deep breath. When he spoke again, his voice was different, softer, more musical, as if he was reciting something sacred. "The stars do not know that we are watching. The void does not care that we are crossing. But we carry our words across the darkness, and in our words we carry ourselves. The universe may forget us. The universe may erase us. But as long as one person can read these marks, as long as one mind can hold these thoughts, we will never truly die." Silence filled the chamber. Felt something strange happening in her chest, an emotion she could not name. The words were beautiful in a way she had never experienced before. They seemed to resonate with something deep inside her. "That is what it says?" she asked. "That is what it means," corrected. "The actual translation is more complex. Chose her characters carefully. Each one adds shades of meaning that do not exist in your language. Some concepts cannot be translated at all. They can only be felt." Looked at the ancient paper with new respect. It was not just a document. It was a window into another mind, a bridge across thousands of years. "You said you knew who wrote it," she said. "How? These documents are ancient, far older than any living memory." Was quiet for a long moment. When he answered, his voice was heavy with something that might have been grief. "I knew her personally, was my grandmother." The words did not make sense. They could not make sense. The documents had been dated to over 8,000 years ago. No species lived that long. No individual could span such an enormous stretch of time. "That is impossible," said. "Yes," agreed, "it is, and yet here I am." He turned away from the display case and walked toward the door. "Director, there is much I need to tell you, much that your galaxy does not understand about my people. But it is a long story, and I have waited a very long time to tell it. Will you walk with me?" Hesitated only for a moment. Then she followed the impossible human out of the chamber, leaving the ancient words of glowing softly in the darkness behind them. Outside the archive, the artificial sun was rising again. A new day was beginning on Prime, but knew that something far more significant had just started. The galaxy had spent ages studying a lost human tongue. Now a human had returned to speak it. And nothing would ever be the same. The gardens of Prime were famous throughout the galaxy. Plants from 1,000 worlds grew here in carefully maintained harmony. Flowers that bloomed only once per century stood beside trees that regenerated daily. It was a place of peace and beauty, designed to help scholars clear their minds between long sessions of research. Had walked through these gardens many times, but she had never walked them like this, never with a ghost from history at her side. Moved through the alien plants with surprising comfort. He stopped occasionally to examine a flower or touch a leaf, his eyes reflecting something that could not read. He seemed lost in thought, as if he was deciding where to begin his story. "You said you knew the writer personally," finally said. "You said was your grandmother. How is that possible?" Did not answer immediately. He paused beside a crystal fountain that scattered light in rainbow patterns across the ground. When he spoke, his voice was distant. "How much do your records say about the end of humanity?" Had memorized every available document on human history. The information was sparse and often contradictory. "The records say your species expanded rapidly during the first expansion era. You colonized dozens of worlds in a few centuries. Then something happened. A war, perhaps, or a natural disaster. The records are unclear. By the time the Galactic Council formed, humans were already gone. Only ruins and artifacts remained." Nodded slowly. "That is partly correct. We did expand rapidly. Too rapidly, some would say. We were young and eager and full of dreams. We thought the universe was ours to claim." He sat down on a stone bench beside the fountain. Remained standing, her 4 eyes fixed on his face. "The other species did not welcome us," continued. "We were loud and aggressive and demanding. We did not respect the territories that had been established before our arrival. We took worlds that others had claimed. We disrupted trade routes that had existed for. We made enemies." The records mention conflicts between humans and the Empire. They were the most dangerous, but they were not the only ones. 6 major powers saw us as a threat. They formed an alliance. Not to destroy us, they claimed, just to contain us, to limit our expansion until we learned to behave properly. His expression grew darker, but containment turned into something else. Blockades became sieges. Restrictions became starvation. Our colonies were cut off from each other. Our supply lines were disrupted. Millions of my people died in the first decade of the containment. Felt a chill run through her. The records had never mentioned this. The official history spoke of humans fatting away naturally, unable to compete with more advanced species. It said nothing about deliberate extermination. "The war lasted 300 years, said. 300 years of fighting, of dying, of losing everything we had built. By the end, there were only a few million humans left in the entire galaxy. We had been reduced to a handful of hidden colonies, barely surviving on the edges of known space." "But you survived," said. "You are here now." "Some of us survived, the ones who were willing to do what was necessary." Stood up and began walking again. Followed, her mind racing with questions. "What was necessary?" she asked. Did not answer directly. Instead, he reached into a pocket of his gray garment and something small. It was a piece of paper, similar to the one in the archive but smaller, fresh. The symbols on it were crisp and clear. "Do you know what makes the human mind unique?" he asked. Considered the question. "Your brain structure was unusual according to the biological records we have, highly adaptable, capable of extreme creativity, but not exceptional compared to many galactic species." "You are thinking like a scientist," said. looking at structure rather than function. The human mind is not special because of how it is built. It is special because of what it can do. Our minds can change themselves. All minds can learn and adapt. Learning and adaptation are one thing. What I am describing is something different. When a human learns our written language, truly learns it, the structure of their brain physically changes. New connections form. New patterns of thought become possible. The language rewrites the mind that learns it. Stopped walking. That is not possible. Language is a tool. It cannot alter neurology. Your languages cannot. They are designed for efficiency, like you said. Quick to learn, easy to use. But our language is different. Each character we learn creates new pathways. Each text we master opens new possibilities. A human who has achieved true fluency in does not think the same way as a human who has not. They see connections that others miss. They understand patterns that others cannot perceive. Held up the paper in his hand. This is why we created our language in the first place, not just to communicate, to evolve, to become something more than what we were born as. His mind struggled to accept what she was hearing. Even if that were true, it does not explain how you have lived for 8,000 years. Smiled faintly. No, it does not. For that, I need to tell you about the project. They had reached a small clearing in the gardens. A circle of strange trees surrounded them, their leaves glowing with soft bioluminescence. Sat down on the grass and gestured for to join him. When the war was lost, when we knew that conventional survival was no longer possible, my grandmother and others like her began searching for alternatives. They asked themselves a question that no one had ever asked before. What if the mind could exist without the body? Skin flickered through several colors. Consciousness transfer. Many species have attempted this. None have succeeded in creating true continuity. Your scientists tried to copy the mind, to create a duplicate that could exist in an artificial substrate, but copies are not the same as the original. The moment you create a copy, there are two separate beings. The original remains trapped in the dying body while the copy continues in the machine. That is not survival. That is reproduction. Then, what did your grandmother do differently? Lay back on the grass and looked up at the alien sky. She realized that the problem was not the technology. The problem was the nature of consciousness itself. Most minds are fixed, rigid. They exist in a single pattern that cannot be transferred without being broken and rebuilt. But a mind that has been trained through our language, such a mind is different. It is fluid, adaptable. It can learn to exist in new forms. He reached up as if touching something invisible above him. Spent 50 years perfecting a technique, not a technology exactly, more like a discipline, a way of training the mind to separate itself from the biological substrate, a way of achieving what she called the flowing state. And this state allows consciousness to continue after death. It allows consciousness to transcend death. A mind in the flowing state does not need a body to exist. It can persist in the patterns of energy that surround all matter. It can inhabit suitable hosts when necessary. It can experience time in ways that your language has no words for. Felt dizzy. The implications of what was describing were staggering. If true, it would rewrite everything the galaxy understood about consciousness, death, and existence itself. Are you saying that humans still exist, that they have been living as, what, ghosts, spirits? Sat up and looked at her directly. I am saying that the war did not destroy us. It simply forced us to change. The survivors who learned my grandmother's technique have been watching the galaxy for 8,000 years. We have seen empires rise and fall. We have witnessed atrocities and triumphs. We have waited and observed and remembered. Waiting for what? For the right moment, for the galaxy to be ready to hear our story. Eyes were intense now, burning with an ancient fire. When we saw that your scholars were studying our language, we knew that time was approaching. When we realized how seriously you were trying to decode our writing, we knew we had to act. Why Why does it matter if we learn your language?" Reached out and took's hand. His touch was warm, solid, completely real. Because the language is not just writing. It is a doorway. Anyone who truly masters can learn the techniques my grandmother developed. Anyone can achieve the flowing state. Anyone can transcend death. Pulled her hand back. Her mind was racing, overwhelmed by the implications. "You are saying that your language contains the secret to immortality." "I am saying that our language is the first step on a path that leads beyond mortality. But it is not a simple path. It requires decades of study. It requires changing the fundamental structure of your mind. It requires giving up everything you think you know about yourself and becoming something new." He stood up and brushed the grass from his garment. "That is why we hid ourselves. That is why we let the galaxy believe we were extinct. We knew that if this knowledge became public too soon, it would be misused. Species would try to learn our language without understanding it. They would seek immortality without being prepared for what it truly means. The results would be catastrophic. But you are revealing it now. To me, why?" Turned to face her. In the soft glow of the bioluminescent trees, he looked both ancient and young at the same time. A being who had seen 8,000 years of history, standing in a garden on an alien world, sharing secrets that could reshape the universe. "Because you are different," he said. "For 300 years, your family has studied our writing, not for profit or power, not for military advantage or political gain, simply because you wanted to understand, because you believed that a lost species deserved to be remembered." Thought of her grandmother's grandmother, the first in her family to dedicate herself to the human mystery. She thought of all the generations between, passing down the obsession like a sacred trust. She had never questioned why it mattered. She had simply known that it did. "The galaxy has changed since the war," continued. "The old empires have fallen. The species that hunted us are scattered or gone. A new order has emerged, one that might be capable of handling this knowledge responsibly. But we needed someone to bridge the gap, someone who could help introduce our language to the galaxy in a way that honors its purpose." "You want me to teach to other species?" "I want you to understand it first, truly understand it. Once you do, you will know whether it should be shared and how. That decision will be yours, not mine." Was silent for a long time. The weight of what was offering pressed down on her. It was not just knowledge he was giving her. It was responsibility. The future of countless species might depend on the choices she made. "Why should I trust you?" she finally asked. "You are a stranger, a ghost from a forgotten age. How do I know this is not some kind of manipulation, some ancient scheme to harm the galaxy?" Nodded as if he had expected this question. "You cannot know, not yet. Trust must be earned, and I have not earned yours. All I can offer is proof, evidence that what I have told you is true." "What kind of proof?" "Come with me to Sector 7 Delta, to the world called Alexandria. I will show you what remains of our civilization. I will introduce you to others like me. I will let you see for yourself what the flowing state truly means." Sector 7 Delta, the restricted zone that had been sealed since before the Galactic Council formed. The place where something terrible had supposedly happened during the first expansion era. "The archive authorities will never allow it," said. "That sector has been off-limits for thousands of years." The restrictions were put in place by the same powers that tried to destroy us. Those powers no longer exist. The current council simply inherited the rules without understanding why they exist. Smiled slightly. "Besides, I have ways of traveling that do not require official permission." Knew she should refuse. Every instinct told her that this was dangerous. She was being asked to abandon everything she knew, to trust a being who claimed to have lived for 8,000 years, to venture into forbidden space on the word of a stranger. But another part of her, the part that had spent her entire career chasing a mystery, felt something different. Excitement, anticipation, the thrill of standing at the edge of discovery. "If I come with you," she said slowly, "will you teach me to read your language, truly read it, not just translate it? If you are willing to learn, it will take years, perhaps decades. Your mind will change in ways you cannot predict. You will become someone different from who you are now. Are you prepared for that?" Looked up at the alien sky. Somewhere out there, in the dark spaces between stars, a lost species had been watching and waiting for 8,000 years. They had preserved their language, their culture, their wisdom across an eternity, and now they were offering to share it. How could she refuse? "I will come with you," she said. "I will learn whatever you can teach me, but I have conditions." "Name them." "I must be allowed to continue my research at the archive. I will not simply disappear. My assistant, Ta, will need to know that I am safe." "That can be arranged. And I want to bring some of the other documents with us. If your grandmother wrote the one in our collection, there may be others of equal importance. I want to know what they all say." His expression shifted to something like respect. "You are already thinking like a scholar of my people, understanding the full context, not just individual pieces. Yes, you may bring the documents. Some of them will be difficult to read. Some of them will make you weep, but you should know their contents." Took a deep breath. The decision was made. She was about to step into the unknown, guided by an impossible being toward mysteries she could not imagine. "When do we leave?" "Tonight, before the council can learn what has happened and try to interfere." That gave her only a few hours to prepare, a few hours to say goodbye to the life she had known, a few hours to step from one world into another. It was not enough time, but somehow knew that it was exactly right. As they walked back toward the archive, spoke again. "There is one more thing you should know before we go." "What is it?" "The document you have studied for so long, my grandmother's poem. It was not just a meditation on mortality and memory. It was a message specifically for whoever finally decoded it." Stopped walking. "A message for who?" "For you, for whoever spent centuries trying to understand us. My grandmother knew that eventually someone would come along who cared enough to try, someone who would not give up, someone who would see the beauty in our writing and refuse to let it be forgotten." Turned to face her. "The poem contains coordinates, hidden in the structure of the characters and the patterns of the strokes, coordinates to Alexandria, to where we have been waiting all this time." His hearts pounded. 327 years, generations of scholars, and all along the answer had been right there in the document itself. They had simply never known how to look. "We never noticed," she whispered. "You could not have noticed, not without understanding how our language truly works. The coordinates are embedded in the meaning itself, in the philosophical connections between characters. Only someone who could read at a deep level would ever see them." "Then why did you come to us? If the coordinates were always there, why not simply wait for us to find them?" Smile returned, gentle and patient. "Because you were getting close. Your latest analysis methods were beginning to detect patterns that should have been invisible to you. Another few years, and you might have stumbled onto something you were not ready for. I came to make sure that when you found us, you would understand what you were finding." The archive loomed ahead of them, its crystal spires catching the light of the artificial sun. Somewhere inside, Ta was probably worrying about what had happened to his director. Somewhere inside, the council's representatives were probably demanding answers about the strange visitor. None of that mattered anymore. Was about to begin a journey that would change everything, not just for her, but for the entire galaxy. The language that had puzzled her ancestors was about to reveal its secrets. And those secrets would reshape the universe. Walked beside her, an ancient being in a young body, carrying 8,000 years of history in his mind. He was the key to everything she had ever wanted to know. And he was offering to open the door. All she had to do was step through. The crystal doors of the archive opened before them. The journey to Alexandria was about to begin, and knew, with absolute certainty, that she would never see the galaxy the same way again. The ship that provided was unlike anything had ever seen. It had no visible propulsion system, no obvious controls. It looked like a perfectly smooth sphere of dark metal, roughly 50 meters in diameter, floating silently in a hidden clearing outside the archive. "How does it work?" she asked. Placed his hand against the sphere's surface. A section of the metal simply faded away, revealing an interior that glowed with soft amber light. "The same way I work, through will and understanding. The ship is not really a ship. It is a thought-given physical form." Did not understand, but she followed him inside anyway. The interior was larger than the exterior should have allowed. A comfortable living space surrounded a central chamber filled with unfamiliar devices. There were no seats or navigation panels, just open space and gentle light. "Sit anywhere you like," said. "The journey will take several hours, but you will not feel any movement. The ship does not travel through space in the traditional sense." Lowered herself onto what looked like a cushioned platform. It adjusted to her body's shape immediately, supporting her in perfect comfort. "If it does not travel through space, then how do we reach Sector 7 Delta? We move the universe around us. It is a distinction that may seem meaningless, but it matters greatly at a fundamental level." Before she could ask more questions, the view outside changed. The clearing vanished. The archive vanished. Everything vanished except for a field of stars that seemed impossibly close and impossibly far at the same time. "We have already begun," said. "Alexandria will be visible soon." Watched the stars shift and flow around them. It was beautiful and terrifying. She was traveling through the galaxy in a way that her species had never imagined possible, guided by a being who everything she knew about life and death. "Tell me more about the flowing state," she said. "What does it feel like to exist without a body?" Sat down across from her. In the amber light, his features seemed to shimmer slightly, as if he was not entirely solid. "It is difficult to describe in your language. The closest concept might be dreaming while awake. You are aware of everything around you. You can perceive reality, but you are not limited to a single viewpoint. You can be anywhere. You can be many places at once. Time becomes flexible. The past and future become accessible in ways that a physical mind cannot experience." "That sounds wonderful." "It can be. It can also be terrifying. When you are not anchored to a body, it is easy to lose yourself, to spread so thin that you forget who you are. Many of my people chose not to continue after achieving the flowing state. They let themselves dissolve into the background energy of the universe. They became one with everything, which is another way of saying they became nothing. But you chose to continue." "I had reasons to continue. Memories I was not willing to release. People I was not ready to forget. My grandmother was one of them. She dissolved herself 3,000 years ago after deciding that she had waited long enough. But I still feel her presence sometimes. In the patterns of energy that surround certain stars, in the echoes of thoughts that drift through empty space." Tried to imagine existing for thousands of years, watching everyone she knew fade away while she continued on. It sounded lonely beyond anything she could comprehend. "How many of your people are left?" she asked. "In the flowing state, several 100,000, perhaps 1,000,000. It is difficult to count precisely. We do not gather in the physical sense. We do not maintain constant contact. Some of us have been silent for centuries, lost in contemplation or exploration of distant regions. Others are very active, observing the development of new species, watching the rise and fall of civilizations. And none of you ever made contact before now. There have been occasional contacts, moments when one of us felt compelled to intervene or assist, but always anonymously, always leaving no trace. We agreed long ago that the galaxy should develop on its own terms. We are observers, not rulers." But now you are breaking that rule. Nodded slowly. Yes, because the time has come, because your species and others have reached a point where you are ready to take the next step, and because, honestly, I was tired of waiting. The ship began to slow. Could not feel any change in motion, but the stars outside stopped their strange dance. A planet appeared ahead of them, blue and green and brown, swirling with clouds. Alexandria said, "Home." As they descended through the atmosphere, saw things that made her hearts race. Cities. Enormous cities of glass and metal, sprawling across continents. Ships moving between structures. Lights glowing in the gathering darkness of the planet's night side. "You said humans went extinct," she whispered. "You said you only survived in the flowing state." "Most of us did, but some chose to remain physical, and over the centuries, those who remained have rebuilt what was lost." The ship touched down in a wide plaza surrounded by buildings that combined alien architecture with something unmistakably human. Curves and angles merged in ways that seemed to express emotion through pure geometry. Had never seen anything so beautiful. A crowd had gathered around the landing area. As the ship's door opened, saw faces, human faces, hundreds of them, young and old, tall and short, every variation of appearance imaginable. "Welcome to Alexandria," said. "Welcome to what remains of my people." The next few days were a blur of wonder and confusion, was introduced to human society in all its strange complexity. She met scholars and artists and scientists. She saw laboratories where technologies beyond galactic comprehension were being developed. She visited libraries that made the Prime Archive look like a child's collection. But most of all, she learned about the language. Assigned her a teacher, an ancient woman named Song Wei who had been alive during the original war. Song Wei's body was frail, but her mind was sharper than anyone had ever encountered. "You have studied our writing for many years," Song Wei said during their first lesson. "But you have been studying shadows on a wall. Now you will see the fire that casts them." The lessons were intense. They began with basic characters, the simple ones that human children learned first. But even these simple symbols contained depths that had never imagined. Each character had a history, a story, a connection to thousands of other characters that modified and enriched its meaning. "This is Mu," Song Wei said, drawing a character that looked like a tree with spreading branches. "It means tree, but it also means wood and lumber and material, and anything that grows and can be shaped. When you write Mu, you are not just naming an object. You are invoking an entire category of existence." Practice the character 100 times. Her strokes were clumsy at first. Song Wei corrected her patiently, adjusting the angle of her stylus, the pressure of her hand, the rhythm of her movements. "The character must flow," Song Wei insisted. "It is not just marks on paper. It is energy given visible form. Your intention travels through your hand into the ink. If your mind is scattered, the character will be scattered. If your mind is clear, the character will be clear." Weeks passed. Learned to write dozens of characters, then hundreds. She began to see patterns that had been invisible before, connections between symbols, relationships between concepts. The language was not just a system of communication. It was a map of reality itself. She began to notice changes in her own thinking. Problems that had seemed difficult became clearer. Connections that had been hidden became obvious. It was as if her mind was expanding, making room for new ways of understanding. "This is what told me about," she said to Song Wei one day. "The changes in the brain, I can feel them happening." Song Wei smiled. Her ancient face creased with satisfaction. "You are progressing faster than most. Your species has a natural flexibility of mind that suits our language well. In time, you may achieve things that even humans struggle with." "In time, how much time?" "Years, decades, perhaps a lifetime, but the journey itself is valuable. Each step brings new understanding. Each character learned opens new doors." Thought about the council back on Prime. By now they would have noticed her absence. There would be investigations, questions, perhaps even accusations, but she could not bring herself to care. What she was learning here was worth any price. One evening came to her quarters. He carried a bundle wrapped in soft cloth. "I have something for you." Inside the bundle were the documents she had brought from the archive, the ancient papers covered in her grandmother's writing. She had almost forgotten about them in the rush of new experiences. "I thought we might read them together," said, "now that you can understand some of what they say." They sat in small garden, surrounded by human plants that she had learned to tend. Spread the documents carefully on a low table. The familiar symbols glowed in the fading light. "This one first," said, pointing to a document that had studied for years without understanding. She looked at the characters, and for the first time she could read them. "When the darkness comes, let the light within guide you. When the silence falls, let your voice rise. We are the keepers of meaning. We are the guardians of thought. In our words, the universe knows itself." Her voice trembled as she read. The meaning of the symbols poured into her mind, not just as translation but as experience. She could feel the emotion of the writer, the determination, the hope. "This was written during the war," said quietly. "During the worst years, when we were losing everything. My people needed something to believe in, something to hold on to. The language gave them that." "Your grandmother wrote this too." "No, this was written by a soldier named. He died defending a colony that no longer exists, but his words survived. His thoughts live on in everyone who reads them." Read the other documents. Each one revealed new depths: poetry and philosophy, history and prophecy, personal letters and public declarations, the voices of a people who had faced extinction and refused to surrender. By the time she finished, the night had fallen completely. Stars filled the sky above Alexandria, different from the stars above Prime but equally beautiful. "Why did you preserve all of this?" she asked. "Why did it matter so much to save the writing when so many lives were lost?" Was quiet for a long moment. When he answered, his voice was heavy with centuries of thought. "Because we realized something during the war. Bodies can be destroyed. Worlds can be burned. Everything physical can be taken away. But ideas, true ideas expressed in their fullest form, those are immortal. They exist independently of the matter that contains them. They can travel across time and space. They can survive anything." He picked up the document containing his grandmother's poem, the one that had started everything. Understood this better than anyone. She knew that even if every human died, even if every city was destroyed, our language would survive. Somewhere, somehow, someone would find these writings, and when they learned to read them, truly read them, they would understand us, not just as a collection of facts, but as living minds, as people. And through that understanding, you would live again. Yes, in a sense different from the flowing state, but equally real. When you read these words and feel what felt, she lives in you. Her consciousness becomes part of your consciousness. Her thoughts become your thoughts. That is the deepest magic of language. It allows one mind to inhabit another. Looked at the documents with new understanding. They were not just artifacts. They were doorways, connections across time, bridges between minds separated by 8,000 years. "I want to share this," she said suddenly. "I want to take this back to Prime, to the Council, to everyone. They need to know what you have preserved here." Nodded slowly. "I hoped you would say that, but are you prepared for what it will mean? Teaching this language is not simple. It requires more than schools and textbooks. It requires changing how entire civilizations think. Some will resist. Some will fear what you are offering. Some will try to use it for purposes we cannot predict. I know, but the alternative is worse. The galaxy has spent too long believing that knowledge can only flow in certain directions, that wisdom belongs to certain species, that some forms of thought are superior to others. Your language proves that wrong. It shows that any mind from any world can learn to see the universe in new ways. That is a gift too precious to hide. She stood up and looked at the sky. Somewhere out there, the Galactic Council was debating politics and trade routes and territorial disputes. None of them knew what was waiting here on Alexandria. None of them understood what they were about to receive. "I will return to Prime," she said. "I will tell them what I have learned. I will offer to teach anyone who is willing, and I will accept whatever consequences follow." "You will not go alone," said. "Others will come with you, humans who have chosen to remain physical, teachers who can help you spread the knowledge, and those of us in the flowing state will watch over you, guide you, protect you if necessary." Why would you do all of this for species that try to destroy you? Smiled. It was the same gentle expression she had seen when they first met, but now she understood the depth behind it, the centuries of pain and patience and hope that had led to this moment. Because that is what the language teaches: connection over isolation, understanding over judgment, growth over stagnation. If we had let the hatred of the past define us, we would have become as small and fearful as the ones who attacked us. Instead, we chose to become something larger, something that includes rather than excludes, something that welcomes rather than rejects. He reached out and touched his hand. His skin was warm, real human. "My grandmother wrote her poem 327 years before you were born. She encoded coordinates into it, hoping that someday someone would care enough to find us. She died believing that day might never come, but she wrote the poem anyway, because hope is not about certainty. Hope is about acting on faith even when faith is all you have." Felt tears forming in her eyes, an emotion that transcended species, a connection that needed no translation. "I will honor her faith," she said. "I will make sure her poem reaches every corner of the galaxy. I will teach her language to anyone who wants to learn, and I will spend the rest of my life making sure that humans are never forgotten again." Squeezed her hand. Then her hope was not in vain, and neither was ours. 3 months later, stood before the Galactic Council. The chamber was vast, filled with representatives from 1,000 worlds. All of them watched as the scholar explained what she had discovered. Behind her, a holographic display showed human characters floating in the air, simple ones at first, then more complex, then entire passages from the ancient documents. "This language is not just writing," she told the assembled delegates. "It is a technology for changing the mind, for expanding consciousness, for achieving things that our current understanding says are impossible." Murmurs spread through the chamber, skepticism, interest, fear, all the reactions she had expected. "I know this is difficult to believe. I struggled to believe it myself, but I have experienced what this language can do. I have felt my own mind changing as I learned to read it, and I have met the beings who preserved this knowledge across 8,000 years of history." The holographic display changed. It now showed images of Alexandria, the cities, the people, the impossible technology. Humanity did not go extinct. They transformed. They evolved. And now they are offering to share that evolution with us. All we have to do is be willing to learn. The debate that followed lasted for days. Some delegates accused her of fabricating evidence. Others demanded immediate access to Alexandria. Still others proposed banning any contact with the surviving humans, fearing what their technology might mean for the galactic balance of power. But remained patient. She answered every question. She demonstrated her own growing abilities. She showed documents and recordings and physical evidence that could not be disputed. And slowly, opinion began to shift. The first species to formally request human teachers were the Ta himself came to Alexandria to begin his studies. His many tentacles proved surprisingly well-suited to writing the complex characters. Others followed. Within a year, schools had opened on 12 worlds. Within 5 years, millions of beings from hundreds of species were learning to read and write. Not everyone succeeded. The language was difficult. The mental changes it required were unsettling for some, but those who persevered reported transformations that exceeded anything they had imagined. A warrior discovered that the anger which had driven his people could be channeled into creativity instead of violence. A physicist realized that her equations had been limiting her understanding instead of expanding it. A silicon-based being from a world with no written tradition found that learning to write gave her thoughts a permanence they had never had before. And across the galaxy, a new understanding began to spread. An understanding that the universe was larger and stranger than anyone had believed. That consciousness was not limited to biological brains. That death was not necessarily the end. That meaning could survive the destruction of matter. Watched it all unfold from her new home on Alexandria. She had become fluent in now. Her mind had changed in ways she could barely remember how to describe to those who had not experienced it. She was becoming something new, something neither fully nor fully human, something in between. Visited her often. They would sit in her garden and discuss philosophy, history, the nature of existence. He spoke of things he had witnessed over 8,000 years. She asked questions that he had never considered before. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked one evening. "Revealing yourselves to the galaxy, sharing your secrets?" Considered the question carefully. "Sometimes, when I see how some species misuse the knowledge, when I watch political leaders try to weaponize the language, when I hear about students who push too hard and damage their minds." But overall, no, my grandmother was right. Ideas want to be shared. Knowledge wants to spread. We preserved our language because we believed it had value for all consciousness, not just human consciousness. Keeping it hidden forever would have been a betrayal of what it represents. He looked up at the stars, the same stars that had watched over his people's rise and fall and rise again. "Besides," he added, "the galaxy is more interesting now, more alive. The species that are learning our language are asking questions that we never thought to ask. They are finding new possibilities within the characters. They are taking what we created and making it their own. Is that not dangerous? What if they surpass you?" Laughed. It was a genuine sound, full of warmth and wonder. That is not dangerous. That is the entire point. Parents do not raise children hoping that they will never exceed their parents' achievements. Teachers do not teach students hoping that they will never have original thoughts. We created this language to help consciousness grow. If the galaxy grows beyond us, that will be the greatest success we could imagine. Smiled. She understood now what it meant when he first arrived at the archive. The language was not just a method of communication. It was a gift, a seed, a beginning that could lead to endings no one had imagined. In her quarters, the ancient document sat in a place of honor. His poem was framed on the wall, each character carefully preserved. Read it every night before sleep. The stars do not know that we are watching. The void does not care that we are crossing. But we carry our words across the darkness, and in our words we carry ourselves. 8,000 years ago, a poet had written those words while her civilization burned around her. She had encoded a message of hope into the very structure of her language, trusting that someday, someone would care enough to find it. That trust had not been betrayed. And as the galaxy learned to read the human tongue, as minds across 1,000 worlds began to change and grow, the spirits of those ancient writers lived again. Their thoughts flowed through new minds. Their ideas found new expressions. Their consciousness, preserved in the patterns of their language, spread across the stars. Had written that the universe might forget them, that it might erase them. She had been wrong. In the characters that now danced on screens and papers throughout the galaxy, humanity was more alive than ever before. And the journey was only beginning. In a small garden on Alexandria, a scholar and a human who had lived for 8,000 years sat together in comfortable silence. They did not need to speak. They understood each other beyond words. The language that had puzzled the galaxy for so long was now teaching the galaxy new ways to think. And in the quiet spaces between stars, where energy flows without form and consciousness exists without matter, the spirits of the ancient humans watched and waited and smiled. Their children, both biological and linguistic, were ready to take the next step. The universe would never be the same. And that was exactly as it should be.